Hello and welcome to the Red Room. Our guest today, I probably don't have to tell you who he is, but if you're watching this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is the author of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Welcome to the Red Room, James.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
It's our pleasure.
So, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, it's right now 12 years. It is
12 and a half, yeah.
12 and a half? Okay. So when it started, I have to say something before, disclaimer, we don't usually play fantasy games. So some of the questions might sound a little bit strange, but that's just because we are ignorant. So when you launched the Lamentations, was there anything as transgressive in the genre of fantasy at that time?
Yes. Before I officially, started operations, Jeffrey McKinney had released Carcosa the year before, and that I was actually just looking at that today, the old thread from 2008, where people just lost their minds. There was somebody saying, "I'm going to call the FBI on you for releasing this," and it was, yeah. As far as the old school OSR kind of environment, yeah, I think that was the one that was the first one to really get people angry. Before that, there would have been, well, there was the Book of Erotic Fantasy, but that was a D20 thing, OGL thing that I don't have any personal experience with that one. But then, yeah, I think that was the big one anywhere in my sphere, because most of what I've played, was like GURPS or Champions or even Palladium, even old D&D. It had some edgy stuff, especially in the books from the 70s. But like Carcosa was just like boom.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I got started in 2009, and the company started, it wasn't. I had released, my first amateur thing was the first printing of the creature generator, the random esoteric creature generator for classic fantasy role-playing games and their modern simulacra is the proper name. But that had like nudity on the front cover and bad words inside, but it wasn't graphic really in any way. And I really didn't start fooling around with that stuff until 2011, 2 years after the company had started. That's when we released the Grindhouse box set, where, then we just went nuts. We released our edition of Carcosa, which kept all the naughty bits intact. And and then the next year after that, Death, Love, Doom, that was just kind of like there's no going back after releasing something like that. So, but I think in this sphere, Carcosa, off the top of my head, sounds like that was the first one, and I had nothing to do with that originally.
So even back then there was some outrage when something like that was launched.
Yeah.
But in a different way, I suppose. 2009, it was people didn't get offended so easily, I think. Even though I wasn't playing role-playing games at the time, I don't think I was. But I remember things were a little bit less prudish. I don't know, maybe.
It depends. I think there was more that could happen without causing problems, but there were still some things. And as people keep reminding me, since I keep forgetting, once you involve kids in any way, even in a fictional context, people just lose their minds. So
yeah, I guess people now have a bigger soapbox to complain about.
Yeah.
There's more. Twitter has grown a lot. Yeah.
But then, well, that was at the beginning. Meanwhile, there are more games that have followed. I wouldn't say exactly the same route, but something like that, some more edgy stuff. I'm just talking about fantasy, of course, not the rest of the. So something like Morporg and several other games like those who also have some heavy metal connection. I don't know, maybe. There's also a heavy metal connection. There was also a heavy metal connection on Lamentations, right?
Inspiration, more than direct connection, I think. But yeah.
In what way is that inspiration appeared?
A lot of the imagery, the attitude, because when I was growing up, heavy metal was the bad guy, the hearings in Congress and all this garbage. And then in the 90s in the US, heavy metal went into a deep slump, and that's when the bands like stopped caring whether or not they were commercially viable, because of course they weren't commercially viable. So that's when they just started going nuts, just more extreme with either the sound or the imagery, or getting experimental, like caring about record sales didn't have to happen for the vast majority of acts, because nobody was going to sell anything in that environment. And that a lot of that weirder stuff was inspirational. It's like, okay, this is what it looks like when you're doing it just for the act of creation. And then so I think all of that's come through in Lamentations. Is if we're going to do this, we're going to do this for real. So I remember all the disappointments as a kid, like D&D was like this secret dark thing that the world hated, and then TSR Caves, and then everything from Body Counts Cop Killer to 2 Live Crew was a big thing in Florida with an obscenity trial. And you see these things where oh, you're not allowed to do this. And I never liked that, even as a kid. I remember as a kid, I didn't understand the controversy behind The Last Temptation of Christ. Didn't understand all the issues involved, but I was still like, why can't people just go see a movie if they want? Why do these people have to not want the movie there?
I don't even understand it now. Yeah, the type of things. If you don't want to see the movie, don't see it.
That one was also a controversy here because
yes,
in Portugal most people are Catholics, so they have that. They get offended by that kind of things. Not probably not as much right now, but in the 80s there were some.
And in the 90s,
yeah,
they were very
into the 90s there was some censorship coming from the religious people, Catholics.
But it was just for the mainstream stuff. If something was mainstream and it was a bit transgressive, people would complain. If it was something that wasn't, nobody knew and nobody cared.
Were you already role-playing when at the time of the Satanic Panic?
I started late 1984. I didn't know anything about the Satanic Panic when I started. My mother actually helped introduce me to Dungeons and Dragons. I think she just wanted to paint the metal figurines as a hobby, but she was a young mother with 2 young kids. And so it's like, okay, I need an excuse to get this stuff in the house. Oh, Jim likes Conan the Barbarian and all these sci-fi movies and stuff. He'll like this. And it was very soon after then that she became aware of all the controversy. So she made me watch Mazes and Monsters with Tom Hanks. Like, sit down and watch it like it's some sort of documentary. Be careful of this. It's like,
I've never seen that.
It's ridiculous. It's of course, because it's actually making the case that role-playing games will drive you crazy and take over your whole life, which in my case, I guess they did. But it's just
it's only in extreme cases. Most people live their life regularly without any problems. I had kind of a in Portugal, I don't think there was, I'm not sure, possibly someone had some problems at that time, but most people, well, the grown-ups didn't know what Dungeons and Dragons was, so it's just another thing in the kids' room, a box something like that. So you started with Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yes. Yeah, Mensa Red Box.
Yeah, the same as I did. That was I think the only thing that was ever translated to Portuguese. The Mensa's Dungeons and Dragons version in '89, I think. When did you start writing as a professional or semi-professional?
Well, I think you'd really have to count my metal zine days, 1998 to 2005 or 6. I put out, I think, 70 something issues of the Lamentations of the Flame Princess metal zine. Some of them were really small, more like newsletters, and some were, 90-page magazines. So, so when I say I put out 70 something, they varied in length and quality, but yeah, that was my first time regularly writing for an audience and trying to figure out what I was doing and how to have a voice, and screwed everything up and did well in other things. And yeah, so I think I got serious in presenting writing to the public 1998. Yeah.
Were you planning on writing a game at that time? It was
I had ideas. I think 2001 is when I first started thinking I wanted to write a game. I didn't like anything that was at the local game store. Like, I'd go there and look through everything. I remember when Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition came out, I bought the 3 core rule books, brought them home, just started reading, and thought, oh no. Because with the character builds and the feats, it's like I have GURPS. I can do GURPS, with character builds and things like that, or champions. It's like I don't want that in D&D. D&D is very simplistic, or should be at its core. And I think that was a shift in the game. Well, the shift in the game was happening during 2nd edition, but I wasn't buying all those supplements. So I didn't see the shift, but basically I looking back, I think I saw Dungeons and Dragons as not about the characters. And this is more explicit now in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, that the game isn't about the characters. The characters they're basically the viewports for the players to look out into the game world, to experience the game world and the challenges and the weird stuff. And that's what the game is, not who your character is. And as the game moved towards defining the character more than treating the character as the window to the game world, yeah, I think I fell more and more out of love with Dungeons and Dragons official versions.
So Lamentations did already exist before, long before it was published, or it was
the name Lamentations did, because when I decided to publish the role-playing game, I didn't see any reason to come up with a new name. So the Lamentations, the Flame Princess name, that was the name of the metal zine that started in 1998. And I just figured, okay, that's my publishing identity. It can be a role-playing game. It can be this or that.
Yeah, it's a good name.
What did you have in mind? Why the Flame Princess?
Well, there were a few things. For the most important thing was that the atmosphere had to reflect my musical taste at the time. Because a lot of the fanzines, especially in the US, were really into like brutal death metal, where it's all blood and guts. And I love horror movies. I love the imagery. But to me, music should be something more than that. So a lot of the amateur fanzines were just concentrating on that stuff. And since that was the level I'm coming in at, it's like, okay, how do I differentiate my zine? And at the time I was really into bands like Opeth and My Dying Bride, and that had more floofy poetic song titles and album titles. So So the zine name had to reflect that sensibility.
It kind of
So,
sounds a little like some of those. Well, probably not bands. It's an extensive name for a band, but probably an album, right?
yeah.
It could be.
Yeah, it was just supposed to communicate that this zine was more about this kind of music and not that kind of music. Yeah.
But were you playing also? I mean, music.
No, I'm not a musician, never learned how to play anything. Yeah.
Just a fan.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I remember when I was growing up, and kids started joining the band, and it's like I had no idea how they were selected. I didn't know that it could be a choice that, oh, you can decide to join the school band and they'll teach you, and then you got to rent instruments and everything. It's like I never knew that was an option. Just suddenly some kids are in the band and they're playing the clarinet, and I was like, oh well, nobody asked me. I don't know. Not that I would have been excited even as a little kid to be playing the kind of things that you would play in the school band. But then as I got older, yeah, I didn't get into metal properly until I was 17 years old. I just graduated high school. So I was looking at another, entering that next phase of life. And then here's this thing. And the idea of, this is so weird now because I'm 40, Jesus, 30 years later. And I'm thinking, oh, I just felt like it was too late. I didn't have the time to learn an instrument then because I was already 17. Well, most kids that would get into rock instruments that I knew, they'd start considerably younger, maybe even before high school. And then if you have a lot of time after school to practice your instrument and you don't have all the responsibilities, then you can get decent. And there's this time that's all yours to spend on that. Whereas when you're starting to enter the real world, even if you're going off to college, as I did, that's still, there's this different set of responsibilities, especially me as a nerd, that especially at the time that's thinking I have to concentrate on these things. And it didn't occur to me, since like I knew of people that played in bands or played guitar, but I didn't personally know anyone. It was years before I met anyone else into metal at all, because it was just, I saw Napalm Death on Headbangers Ball, midnight one Saturday night, I think it was, and went to the local record store and they had the tape. And then, oh, what's in the insert? Oh, this thanks list. Are these other bands? And so I'd go with that thanks list and just go to the record store. It's like, oh, this is on the same record label. Maybe it's the same kind of music. And that's how I did it for years without any contact of no network, didn't know about zines yet, didn't know that there was any network of fans. I wasn't.
So
Yeah.
how did you start into heavy metal? How did you get first as a fan?
As a fan, well, in the mid 80s, I don't count this as being a metal fan, because things like Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister were part of the pop music landscape. So it wasn't that I was specifically interested in metal, but I had those tapes, Metal Health and Stay Hungry. I will count even Michael Jackson's Thriller, even though it's not metal. I mean, the song Thriller, especially paired with the video, it's got that same vibe.
Yeah.
And because the first tapes, the first music I ever had my mother buy for me, it was on the same day. It was Michael Jackson's Thriller and Weird Al in 3D. And Weird Al, on that album has got the song Nature Trail to Hell, which is like a loving satire of 80s slasher movies, just making fun of all the cliches. But it has that edge. It's joking about, just hacking people to bits, because that's what you do in those movies. So that's what he was making fun of. But he's still talking about that in the lyrics to the song, even if it's in a joking manner. So even though those weren't metal in any real sense, they still had that same sort of imagery, that same sort of like attitude behind it, because both the song Thriller and Nature Trail to Hell are both like tributes to horror movies. And I guess that was my in, because a lot of metal, especially what I listened to when I got properly into metal, was like horror movie in music form. I was listening to Carcass and Cannibal Corpse and that sort of thing.
Didn't you have, I'm asking this because here in Portugal, there's a bit of an overlap between the metal, or it used to be, the metal community and the role-playing community. All the nerds were metal and the role-playing nerds. Well, not of them, all of them, but a lot.
Yeah, well, there was definite, well, that was something I learned after the fact, because the stuff I was listening to, or in like my role-playing friends, like my mother got me into Dungeons and Dragons, and the way I got players is I started asking my friends, people I knew, you want to play this game? I wasn't plugged into a role-playing community, so I had no idea what the connections were. You know, I had no idea what normal role players were into, what their music tastes were. I mean, I know that, you know, once I got into like music and metal in particular, and then started looking back, even things like Blue Oyster Cult and Led Zeppelin, you know, the stuff that had the sword and sorcery songs that were, but for my time. But it's like, okay, it's like now I came to understand there was a connection, but at the time, you know, it was years and years before I was listening to Dungeons and Dragons metal bands, because all the 80s sword and Conan the Barbarian metal, that wasn't mainstream, so it wasn't on my radar yet, because I was just a kid, you know, watching MTV.
Yeah.
So horror movies are obviously another influence.
Yes.
Let's talk about a bit about horror movies. What kind of horror? And I suppose you'll probably got into European horror, I suppose, some of.
European horror wasn't until the late 90s. Because again, my mother was a big horror movie fan, so she introduced me to horror movies probably way too early, to be honest.
So when did you start? Just out of curiosity.
Oh God, I couldn't even answer that. I know that we didn't get a VCR until 86, 87. And I remember once we got the VCR, I was already a horror fan, because then it was like, okay, we have a video store just up the street, so let's go get all those movies we haven't seen yet that we've been wanting to see, now that we can just watch them whenever we want on tape. So I was already familiar with and liking horror before then. But exactly when, because I remember Ghostbusters, I guess if you're a little kid, Ghostbusters counts as horror, because you're going to miss half the humor in that thing anyway. So that was 1984. Yeah, I was already going to see Ghostbusters and Gremlins. Even things like Raiders of the Lost Ark was earlier than that, and that's certainly the end of that movie is as horrific as anything that's ever been put on film. Yeah, Conan the Barbarian. I remember it was so weird, because I remember being scared to death, because I was collecting the Conan, Savage Sword of Conan, black and white comics at the time, and of course they're hyping that this movie is coming out. But I was still a young kid. If that was 1982, I still would have been 7 years old. And so I remember the comic book, you know, had this feature about the movie coming out, and it has this picture of like the witch. It's like a real close up with the eyes. And as a little kid, I couldn't look at that. It scared me too much, that I just like the issue of the comic book. It was in the back. It was the story that had like the Frankenstein monster and Conan seeing the hallucinations in the fire. I'm sure somebody will now say, I remember that story, but it's like, I just had to remember, if I'm reading that one, I can't be looking for the bonus features in the back, because there's going to be that witch, and I just couldn't deal with it. But I still would get taken to see the movie, you know, and it's I don't know, I really liked the movie, and you know, it had nudity and it had blood, and I don't remember that bothering me. And even with the witch thing, it's different if it's in a context and it's moving and it's got the and you go and then it's gone. It's not like there's a picture that's staring at you forever in the comic book. So it's seeing the movie was easier than looking at the still. But yeah, that's 82. So yeah, I really can't place the horror fandom at any specific time, but just since any memories of movies, it's those scenes that stand out to me. That and the idea that not only was I scared, but it for some reason it felt good to be scared, and that's gone on. I like well, it's a few years ago now. When Babadook came out, you know, it didn't come out properly in Finland, but there was some indie theater doing a special showing, and the monster reveal in Babadook. Here I am, a grown man in my 40s, and I just lost control of myself. I didn't know whether I was going to have a heart attack or just shit my pants, because I was just paralyzed with fear as the monster reveal, and it's creeping up the screen. And I was like, oh my God, if my heart just burst right here, would anybody notice until the lights came up at the end of the movie? It was, and I go, when I go to horror movies, like I go to this film festival that usually happens twice a year in non-COVID times. It's got a lot of genre movies and a lot of weird underground horror. And if the movie's at all decent or suspenseful, like if I'm in a theater full of people, I'm not going to do this, but my instinct is to cover my eyes. But I can't do that in front of all the hardcore horror nerds, so I squint. So I like I remember the end of Paranormal Activity when that came out. It's like at the end of the movie, it's like, okay, this is so setting up a big jump scare, like one of those stingers at the end where something's going to go rah. So it's like, oh boy, and I'm like, and so I'm just like, okay, it's not going to get me, it's not going to get me, and I go, yeah. Although those movies use cheap tactics too. There was a movie just a couple of years ago, I think, The Curse of La Llorona or something like that. It takes place in the Conjuring universe. I didn't know what I was seeing. It was at the film festival, and I don't research the movies I see there because the point is to see weird new things. So I was disappointed when I realized I was watching a mainstream horror movie. You know, as soon as the Annabelle doll showed up on screen, I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. I could have seen some documentary about a subject I don't care about. But
they can still scare you because it's really set up, especially if you are in a cinema. The sound comes at the right, it's really annoying.
Exactly, because once I saw and how they were operating, it's like, okay, I'm just going to close my eyes and not watch the movie. And I was still jumping at the jump scares just because of the sound design, not catching any of the suspense or any of the visual cues, not feeling anything, but the sound alone will do it, even if you have no. And it's like, oh, that's cheating. Cheating.
Well, it's usually the only thing that scares people right now.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But the best jump scare in horror history has to be Exorcist 3. And if you've seen that movie, you know exactly the scene I'm talking about.
Actually, no, because I'm kind of desensitized to horror. I can't be scared.
First horror film was The Exorcist, right?
You were now saying that, well, telling that you still get scared when they're, but I can't. I missed that, but I can't anymore. I don't know. Something happened.
Well, I think that's why a lot of what I do as far as publishing plays around with a lot of things that are either gross or shocking, because that sort of thing still works on me. So it's
That's why you are successful and I am not. I can't be shocked anymore. That's interesting.
But it sometimes can be also disgusting. You can write disgusting stuff.
Yeah, I can.
But that also works if you get people grossed out. That for me it works. It's not really scaring me, but oh, this movie is disgusting. Please stop doing this. I don't want to see this scene anymore.
Yeah, well, I remember it was not that many years ago. There was either a Spanish or a Mexican horror movie, a Spanish language anyway. Really low budget thing, but it fell. I forget the name of it, but it fell directly in like the torture porn genre of movie.
Mhm.
And it was just this really badly acted movie, and then somebody would get kidnapped, and then there'd be a torture scene. But it was so badly done that we were laughing at the movie because it was obviously trying too hard, and there was like no craft, no skill in the filmmaking. So it's just, the musical cue, and here comes the torture again, and the crowd's like laughing, like that's, like, how do I say this? It's like a bat with barbed wire wrapped around it, and the scene was that they were just gonna right up there, and it's supposed to be horrific torture, and people are just laughing at it because it's the way it was handled was not shocking. It was not serious. It wasn't gross. It was just so clumsy. So, but again, that's like the horror movie festival crowd that has seen everything. And I'm always curious, if I sat down and showed that to like a normal person, what would they do? Would that freak them out, or would they just say, "Oh, that's a bunch of shit"? I'm always curious about those things, but how do you find a normal person to show that kind of movie to? And it's like, well, I probably won't know them very long, but
Yeah.
we can do this experiment.
I'm doing this experiment with my niece. She's 7. My sister hates horror. I'm not exactly doing it yet, but she loves horror. She loves it, and I'm just okay. Do you want to go to auntie's house and see movies? And my sister's like, be careful. Then I'm gonna have to deal with her nightmares. But I can see that on her. She's scared, but she likes it. She wants to be scared.
So, Sally, what did you think of a Serbian film?
I can't even remember that one. But I saw it, but I can't
That
remember.
was a little bit, yeah.
Disgusting,
disgusting. Yes.
I was so
How did someone came up with that story? That was my.
Well, again, I went into the movie not knowing what it was. It was just, okay, some Serbian horror movie. Okay, let's sit down. I was with my ex at the time. No idea that this was going to be anything other than normal B movie schlock. But it was so well made that I was trying to disassociate myself from what I was watching. I mean, I was just like, no, this is wrong. No. So like when they'd have a scene with a kid, it's like, oh, please let this movie be crappy. Let me see like the little dividing line in the digital compositing, please. Oh God. And it was like, that's one of the 3 most screwed up movies I've ever seen. And I saw it in public. I remember walking home with my ex, and she was just like, I hate that I saw that movie. I don't want any of those images in my brain. And I'm thinking the same thing, but I'm also thinking it was great because how many movies affect me like that?
It makes you feel dirty.
So you have to watch that again, I think. I can't remember it. I have to watch it again.
I remember. It was awful.
I have a very bad memory. I forget everything.
Yeah, and then but then there'd be something like the Blair Witch Project, which wasn't graphic at all, and that, it wasn't one of the most screwed up movies I've ever seen, but I had that similar to the Babadook reaction, the thing where the atmosphere hit me so hard that I was just like, oh my, holy shit, what was that? And I hadn't really heard much of the hype. I didn't think it was real before I saw it. I just went to see it at some dingy indie, cinema. And it was just like, and I sat front row, so the thing's taken up my entire field of vision, and it's just like, when that thing ended, I was just like, I was in a daze, like, and it was summer when it came out, and I was living in Atlanta, so I'm walking out, and like the sun seems dark, and and it's just like, that was masterful, and yeah, when a movie can do that to me, it's just like that's it. I for some reason, I love being mentally scarred by film. That's how you know it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
If it doesn't, yeah, that's art needs, especially if it's horror. It can't be safe.
Yeah.
You'll have to talk about safety tools after this. I was remembering the only thing that sometimes annoys me a bit is animal cruelty scenes.
Yeah, and I remember there was a
Especially
film.
in Italian movies of the 70s, because I'm never sure if this is real or not.
Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah. Okay, they can tell that no, it wasn't real. It was special effects. I don't know. Probably
Well,
not.
well, the thing. Oh, I remember. This was early on in LOTFP. I had an idea to do a cannibal adventure that never got done, but the local video store near me in Helsinki here had, for some reason, a ton of Italian cannibal movies available for rent, which is weird. That's a weird selection to have. And so they had this deal. It was like 7 movies for 7 days for €7, something ridiculous like that. So I was like, okay, I got a whole pile of cannibal movies to research for this thing. And they were all post Cannibal Holocaust. And Cannibal Holocaust had like a point. It had some artistry. I mean, it was a low budget, dingy thing, but there was like some creative impulse behind it. And I think that's why that one survives and is the legend of really screwed up movies. Whereas these other cannibal movies were ridiculous. They were just copied things like Cannibal Holocaust had the real life animal deaths.
They look like the same thing, right? They all look the same.
But well, Cannibal Holocaust had, as part of the story, they like real life killed animals on camera in the scenes. But this other cannibal movie would be like, oh, well, we're doing a cannibal movie. We have to have animal deaths. So they'd cut away from the movie and there'd be like this mouse or something that's tied to a stake in the ground, by the leg. And then here comes a snake that has nothing to do with the movie. It's like they set up this thing as a separate thing just so you can see a snake eat an animal. Yeah. And then they'd cut back to the movie and it's like, oh my God, they completely, what are you doing?
I think I remember that. I don't remember the name of the movie, but I think I saw that also.
Yeah. And all of them, Cannibal Holocaust had someone's penis getting chopped off and eaten. So every cannibal movie has to have that. Including, there was one movie, we watched one cannibal movie and it was like, oh, that was crappy. And then we watched the next one. That next one, I guess in their movie, they didn't have an eat a penis scene. So they inserted the scene from the movie we just saw. It was like an insert where they had to have this scene to make sure they had the penis thing, even though the cannibals had like different design, different paint. So it was so obviously not part of the same movie, but it's like, oh, we have to have this in our movie. Well, we'll just take it from that other one. No one will care. And I was just like, oh my, this is the worst. This is awful. But Cannibal Holocaust is that still works even to this day. You look at that movie and it's just like, oh, whoa, Jesus, what's wrong with these people?
There was a film that I tried to watch recently, an old one. Do you remember about the killer whales? That I couldn't watch because the orca, yes, because that scene when they fish the orca and then the baby orca, the orca has an abortion. It's like, no, I can't see this movie. Turn it off.
It's weird. The movie Orca gives more motivation for the killer whale that the audience can sympathize with than most movies give to any character anywhere today. It's like, it's like those movies may have been trash exploitation, but they were like still movies.
I wanted the orca to kill the guys, just kill the bastards.
That had to be the point. I mean, you cannot show that scene and then root for the humans. It's not like Jaws, where like the shark like eats innocent people, ate a kid. It's like, okay, you're rooting for the people to take out this shark. Orca, the humans are just so fucking awful, or at least the one particular. It had to be the intention that you were rooting for the whale. That movie would make no sense if you're rooting for the humans. It's like, why would you shoot it like that? Yeah, I haven't seen that forever, but that's another one in the comic books. They would advertise that. I forget on the back cover or it's on the inside front cover. They would advertise Orca with like a photorealistic movie poster. And there's like Orca jumping through, and like there's this like longboat that's being shattered and people just flying all over the place was the advertisement. But it was either photo composite or photorealistic or something that was disturbing to look at. It was the same thing with the 70s version of King Kong. They had like a photo of King Kong on the Twin Towers, but it was like a photo thing. And me as a little kid, you know, would just be like, ah! This fucking angry gorilla just staring at me. I couldn't deal with it. But again, I think that kind of feeling, and even with Dungeons and Dragons, I know I tell this story every interview, but the first edition Monster Manual, when I was so young as a kid that when I got that, I wouldn't read it at night because a lot of the pictures, especially the undead pictures, they freaked me out. I could only bring myself to look through that book during the day. At night, I just, no way. I'm not looking at the picture of the lich or the zombie or the specter. No. And again, I think that's relevant to what I do now because I try to put pictures in the books, hoping to give adults the same reaction that I had as a kid looking at this sort of thing, which, and it's really futile because the people that would enjoy that aren't shocked by it, and the people that are shocked by it aren't going to enjoy it. So it's kind of this impossible ideal that I have, that people are going to open up this book, just be shocked and horrified, and therefore love it.
Well, maybe not shocked, but people like horror can still enjoy it, even without being shocked. How involved are you in the production of the art?
Depends on the book. If the artist is also the author, then a lot of times I don't see the art at all until it's like, okay, book's done. And it's like, oh God, what do I got to tell them to change? Usually nothing, but but if it's something where the artist is different than the writer will give their input, but it's usually me dealing with the artist, and it depends on the piece, because a lot of times I can tell an artist, okay, we have to fill up half a page on this page, read what's going on here, and send me back some sketches of what you think would be cool that would match the text on that page. Other times, especially with my material, I'll have very specific ideas. And then I'll be probably annoyingly specific with the artist. This is how I want it framed. I want this here and that happening and that. So it depends.
I love the covers, especially the covers, and the colored art is usually very inspiring. And well, this cover is particularly well done. Yeah. I don't know why I can't put it, say this here or that. I don't know. It works.
Yeah, well, it really works. Oh yeah, the rule book cover, that I remember, that's a hell of a thing because for any of the other books, the cover just has to represent what's going on in that book, that source book or that adventure. Just need to get some imagery. But how do you sum up the entire game? Yeah. If you have a cool action scene, that's misrepresenting the game. If you have anything that's traditionally, eye-catching, and it's going to be like, well, is that representing the game? So what you have there is just unknown weirdness. It's not in your face. It's not... It like, you have to get sucked into it and see that, it's like, oh, there's something deeper happening here. And I'm glad it worked. I had a lot of doubts because I didn't know how to sum up the entire game in an image,
Yeah.
but apparently that was good enough.
Oh, it did
That
work.
worked well enough. Yeah.
Even before I had I thought about buying the game. I always thought that ever since I saw the cover that it was a very nice illustration. Great. It stays in your mind. The weirdness of it. So we're still talking about movies. Movies that inspired you, movies in particular, not just the genre, movies in particular that inspired you to write adventures or scenarios.
Well, the Evil Dead movies, including Army of Darkness, because it gets less horror as the series moves along, but it still has the horror imagery. But that Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, smart ass, wise ass attitude combined with all the gore, I mean that's wonderful. I remember, this was long after the company had started, but the TV show Ash versus the Evil Dead, there was that one scene where Ash fights a deadite in a sperm bank. And one of the things that's happening is that one of the girls in a porno mag has come to life and is reaching out from the porno mag to attack him. And like one of the demons is like throwing just sperm at him. And I was just thinking, this is so ridiculous. This is so Lamentations, just so tasteless and over the top and ridiculous, but also I don't know if horrific's the right word, but just graphic in a way that and it's just like this is perfect, and this is on television. I'm not so weird. Because it's like someone gets me. Or like the Suicide Squad movie that came out last year. That scene where it's like that. It's the scene sort of like the beginning of Predator when they're attacking they're attacking the military camp and just slaughtering everyone. And in this case, in Suicide Squad, have you guys seen the movie?
No.
I'm about to
No.
spoil. Okay.
We are avoiding the movies that are too recent because they always suck and we get bored.
Now, the Suicide Squad movie that came out last year was really good. There's a twist on that scene that just turns the whole thing so that it's just like, yes, like I've liked most of what James Gunn has done. I've been a fan of his since the Trauma days. I mean, I remember getting Romeo and Juliet on DVD like
I didn't know that
in the 90s.
He started in Trauma, right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was the script writer for Romeo and Juliet.
I saw that.
And the joke is, the story is that he was just paid $100 for the script, and he told Lloyd Kaufman that he had written it all in iambic pentameter, which wasn't true. But that thing, I mean, yeah, James Gunn has got, even when he's doing like real movies, there's this little bit of subversion. Like, what was the movie with the space slugs? I can't remember, but even that's full with Nathan Fillion, and it's just got so many bits of like complete sociopathy is the only way to say it. Just bits that are so anti-human, that are meant to be funny, that almost nobody else would touch, and certainly nobody on a mainstream level. Or even his movie Super, that was like a really cynical take on superheroes. It's yeah. So there are some mainstream people that I like, but not the ones that fit my vibe, that I'm a fan of the person rather than maybe a work here and there. It's really rare. Although I got to see American Werewolf in London played a couple months ago at the film festival. They had John Landis.
John Landis, yeah.
Yeah, John Landis, he was the guest of honor. So he was in Finland. I actually got to meet him and tell him, it's like, hey, you've been a big influence on me and blah, blah, blah. And I'm glad I'm able to tell you, face to face. Yeah, just American Werewolf in London, even that. Movie's, 40 years old. And just the mix of the horror and the humor and just the sarcasm. It's yeah, that's one I saw early on in the early 80s. It's just you see these certain things, it's like, it speaks to me. And yeah, very, very rare for people to actually get that vibe right.
Yeah. Not easy to mix, to be to disgusting and funny at the same, disgusting and horror scenes. And Ash against the Evil Dead did that really good. I remember a couple of scenes that were disgusting and hilarious and at the same time.
So that is something to try to introduce in your game.
You see, I don't know if it's try to introduce or if it just naturally shows up. Because that whole thing of being both presenting material that's rather antisocial and offensive, both seriously and also in a mocking way. Like this horrible thing that most people think should never be in a product like this, and we're not even going to take it seriously. I mean, there's something, I mean, the inspiration for how things are presented is going to be different author to author and project to project. But there's certainly plenty of things that have this very sarcastic attitude towards the material it's presenting. It's, it's not straight horror. It's not comedy. It's not even proper horror comedy. It's just, how do I say this? It's just kind of like, we know this is horrible and we know you're going to think this is horrible, but that's what makes it funny. And that's a different attitude than, oh, this is horrible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But still, you are seen as someone who is courting outrage, I think.
Well, that's yes and no, because I absolutely really believe nobody should ever be upset by any of my books. But the fact that people are, it's a source of both annoyance and amusement for me. And I think I can honestly say that if those people weren't out there, if those people would just leave alone the things they don't like for the people who would like them, the Lamentations books would still have lots of weird and screwed up stuff, but maybe not as much, because there is something to the, oh, you're telling me I can't do this? Well, look at this. I'm getting the a little bit of the Cartman. You can't tell me what to do. I do what I want. There is a little bit of that. Somebody's telling you can't imagine things like that. Oh, you can't have artwork like that. It's like, well, yes, I can. Yes, I can. and yes, you can. I can. You can. Everybody can.
Do you remember any particular example of something that you decided like that? I'm going to put this here just because it's.
Yes. Oh, yes. For Free RPG Day 2013, we did Better Than Any Man. And there's just one little part of the adventure. It's just one tiny little part where there's an evil wizard and his hobby You know those I forget what it's called, but there was this guy touring museums worldwide that had like real human bodies plastinated. That was
Yeah. I
yeah,
don't
and
remember the name for that, but I watched it.
plastination
Yes,
is what it's called.
that's it.
Yeah, and that was and so the idea is that here's this evil wizard, and the evil wizard thing he does is plastinate children's bodies, and he has them like put up like statues around his lair. And this wasn't illustrated or anything. This is just text. So Better Than Any Man comes out for free RPG day, and there are places that threw the book in the garbage. Yeah, because there was this one story I love telling. There was this one person who went out back and dug out copies from the dumpster behind the game store. But then there was this other story of someone going to the game store and they pick up Better Than Any Man, and someone that worked for the game store said, "You want to be careful of that one. That's all about killing kids." I was like, "What?" And so the next year for free RPG day, we did the Doom Cave of the Crystal-Headed Children, and the cover art of that was an adventuring party in combat with and killing a bunch of kids. And it's like, oh, you're going to say that adventure was about killing kids? Well, look at this shit. And because that, to me, is the proper response when somebody says you can't imagine that way. It's like, no, you don't get to tell people that. You don't get to tell that to people. It's no. If you don't like it, that's fine. You're allowed to not like it. You can proclaim to the world that it sucks. But when you're lying about what something is in order to persuade someone to stay away from it, if you're putting yourself in that situation to defend people from the thing that you don't like, it's like, no, that's not how this shit works. This is what the people did in the 80s, the Satanic Panic and all that.
Exactly.
And it's like, you're just the new face of that same shit. No, you're not worried about Satan, but what you're worried about isn't relevant. You're behaving the same way.
And they are still doing it a lot.
Oh,
Constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Well, just look at the headlines now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
all over the
every
place.
day, one
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, a new one every day. I could, maybe we shouldn't name people to avoid that specific conversation or dating the video we're doing here. But
Yeah, we
yeah,
don't care
just look
about
at the
that.
news. There's someone
already
that's done
canceled,
something
so-
bad that nobody else is allowed to like anymore. And it's like, fuck off, a lot of you. Just
Yeah. It happens, and the pressure does work, right? And again,
well, yeah, because
the latest news.
Yeah, people will say, "Oh, I don't
It
want to
works.
be associated with this person, so I'm not gonna like their games. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say I like their games. I'm gonna touch their games. I'm gonna watch their movies, because if not, people will say I'm a bad person." And some people are actually terrified of that, and I do
Yeah.
believe they are scared of that, and that is what really scares me.
Yeah, well,
Some of
have
them are, I think, they're generally afraid of having
Well,
people going after them.
Well, I have the advantage, if you can call it that, of being an outcast kid. I mean, being into Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s and into comic books and all these sci-fi movies with the horrible special effects of the day. And I even called myself a nerd earlier in this, because that's what I was. Oh, you're that sort of person. You're a nerd. And so and I got into metal in the 90s when just as metal was just dead as far as the mainstream was concerned. It was gone, didn't exist anymore. And here I'm listening to things that's like, so I was never cool. I was never part of the in crowd. I was always the person that everyone looked at like, ew, what is that? So being part of the out group now, it's just like, okay, this is normal. This is normal. The only regret I have is that for a short period of time, Lamentations was like the hot indie thing. And so there was like dreams of like being accepted, and I'm in the industry and I've got a prominent position and I'm on the stage accepting awards. And that was really nice. And I can envision like a life where we just continue this. And oh my God, if I make the same money I made this year, maybe in 10 years, I can have a house. I can actually have property and I can, nope, all gone. And it's like, okay, this natural place, this place that I'm at of being that, oh, you're that, no respectable person. It's like, that's what I expected to be when I started this.
How long
And-
did you
and-
enjoy that success period, and when you thought that it might change?
I think it was I think it went well, so 2015, 3.5 years I think it lasted.
Oh.
So it wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was it was a sense of, oh, maybe I've finally done something where I can be respected. And it's only because I had that period that it feels bad to fall back to my natural place. But
What
but
did happen
consider-
at the end of those 3 years? What did end
the
your?
Zach controversy.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
That was it, because he was the best-selling author on the label basically.
Mm.
And my response to it was half-ass. It's like I didn't keep him on, but I didn't dehumanize him either. I thanked him for the work we had done together for the years that he was with the company. And because I was feeling a lot of pressure, and there was pressure on distribution channels and sales channels and people that were working with me that were bailing, and it was just like, okay, but at the same time, I wasn't going to do this. Oh, this is an evil piece of shit, and we regret it. I wasn't ever going to do that either. And so it's as usual, I take this middle position where nobody gets to be happy with me, but it's like, this isn't like when I had a call center job where I just had to swallow who I was and I do the job. I mean, this is an actual creative studio, creative, I know that sounds pretentious, but we're doing what I hope is somewhat personal work here. There's something of us in the work. So being able to just disassociate and not treat these things personally, it's impossible for me, which probably isn't healthy. I know it's not healthy, but it's like, in some ways, this is the absolute dream job, but it only gets to be the dream job as long as we're doing the things we actually want to do, as long as our actual attitudes towards this sort of work are reflected in the work. To just show up and say, okay, now we have to be professional to maximize market share and make sure we stay popular with all the input, that doesn't work with authenticity. So that's why I say that all happened and it was rough and it sucked. And it's like, okay, we're back to our natural place. These weird gutter punks or whatever the fuck we are, it's.
Yeah, but even if you had to apologize and everything, that wouldn't make sense, because the people that probably wanted you to apologize would not want to play the type of games you're creating. So
Yeah,
you would have to change
exactly.
everything, or eventually they will go after you for something else.
and also
Exactly.
apologizing is never
Yeah.
enough. They cancel you
well,
anyway.
I mean, that's the thing. There was a good quote I found today. I think I still have it up here. And I think it's relevant here, and it'll save me from boring people on Facebook. I'll bore you guys here. This is from Angel Eduardo or Angel Eduardo. Not sure who this is, but because people will get angry and bad things will happen to you as a result is not an argument for why what you're doing is wrong. It's only a reason you may decide against doing it. People act like those are the same thing, but they're not. And so I do things and I publish things that I know are very likely to make certain people angry. But because they get angry does not mean I'm doing something wrong. Because this is all, I like to say this is nonsense, that I make nonsense. And that's absolutely not true on one level, but is exactly true on another. And I said earlier that you can't tell people how to imagine, and it's so weird. It's like I'm wanting to sell books that are supposed to be fun, but they've got this certain vibe to them. This for weirdo, by weirdos, maybe
Yeah.
for weirdos. And the idea that because somebody out there isn't weird in this way, that somehow we are absolutely wrong to be doing what we're doing is bullshit. But it feels like a constant fight to be able to do it. And that's, I know it's clear. Oh, it's so exhausting. But it does. Like when I saw some of the stuff coming down the pike for the last releases, specifically, shall we go into some of the book titles now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
White
the
power,
book,
right?
White Power. And I'll just say this for anyone idly listening: WIGHT power. As in Tolkien barrel.
I noticed today that it was changed to redacted something on drive-through.
Yeah, drive-through. I'm in a position where I can't put anything live on drive-through unless it's approved by them first, because they don't want to be in a position where they're in the middle of a big shitstorm between people, different factions that are on their service. So I have to have everything approved. And they just basically said, yeah, this title, no way. But they actually read the book. They didn't say you can't have this product up. They just said you can't use this title. And so I talked about it with the author, Alex, and he wanted it available. So it's like, okay, we had to change the title. And I thought doing title redacted would both satisfy the requirements of drive-through and make it clear what's going on there. So it's not pretending that this was named this other thing all along. So that's what you got to do. And on one hand, it's annoying that someone has that kind of veto power. On the other hand, I understand their position and not wanting to be in the middle of some stupid shitstorm that they didn't create. And I do appreciate that they actually read the book to know what the book is, and it's not just judging the whole thing on its title.
Something like that has happened before?
Well, it was after the Zach thing happened, and I did the adventure. Zach has nothing to do with this book. And that created a whole thing, and that's why I have to get everything approved first now. And it's like,
that's
okay.
Another problem is that these people have no sense of humor. That's their problem. They need laughter in their lives.
Yeah, it's it's yeah. I mean that's not one of the most that was a bad year. That was a bad year, and there were things that it's weird because like that book in particular was probably business wise and perception wise such a spectacularly bad idea to do, but in the situation I was in is it's like I have to have some self-respect in the situation. So doing something that's just giving a poke in the eye to the people that it's like it was not good business wise, but as a person I had to do it.
But I think it's interesting what you're saying because you can see your position. Okay, it's not just you doing the games. So you have people working with you. You have a company. You have writers. So you don't need to. You're not thinking just about yourself. So when you make some type of decisions, and that's probably something that happens with bigger companies because they're not think they are just, oh, we just want to sell books. We don't want any issues, so we'll do whatever they want us to do.
Yeah, it's I'm.
And then they make crappy games.
all the
Well,
time.
that's the thing. Yeah, I work with people, and I'm like responsible for some other people's livelihoods or decent chunks of side income, and it's just like, oh, all I wanted to do was just make some weird role playing stuff, and it's like, how did that come with responsibility? If I wanted responsibility, I would have gotten a real job. Holy shit. It's wild that it's not, yeah, it's like, okay, you have to have the ideas, you have to execute the ideas, and then people are going to buy it or they're not going to. It's like, okay, those should be the stresses of the job. Oh God, is this going to bring the world down on my head? It should not be part of this job, no matter what we're publishing. And the idea that, yeah, having to always think about that when somebody has some crazy idea, and I move forward. Like when Alex presented me with the title White Power, WIGHT. Even now I feel the need to put that in, just so it's not so easy to just pluck it out and say, look at that, look what he's advocating, because I know that's what these fucking idiots do, and always wanting to support what the creators want to do, and balancing that from is like, oh, can I handle this when this comes out? I hate to even have to be thinking of it that way. I don't want to think of submissions in any other terms of whether or not this seems like a good idea on its own merits by itself as a thing. The idea that I can publish anything, it's like if people don't like that book, that's always a risk, no matter how anodyne, boring, or normal it is, or wild and freaky and tasteless. It's that people might not be interested in that book. That's part of the job. That's a risk you take with every damn thing you ever publish. You can't force people to like something. But the idea that if somebody doesn't like one thing enough, that they're suddenly not going to like any of my other books that they otherwise would have. I must have taken some sharp blows to the head as a child, because I don't understand the mentality. I don't get it. I don't understand how that thinking works. I don't understand how somebody gets there. That not only are we not going to buy the thing we don't like, we're going to publish anybody within like a Kevin Bacon degree of connection to it, just because it exists.
Do you feel you're self-censoring, or you're still resisting the pressure?
I don't. No. Well, I think publishing the Book of Antithesis and White Power shows we're not doing a very good job of self-censoring. I mean, that's the thing. That's what I was talking about before. Knowing that these people are out there, that maybe I'm doing stuff I wouldn't otherwise do just to show my resistance. For example, the title White Power, it's a cute play on words. But if there was no pressure, if there was nobody to prove anything to, I can very easily just imagine saying, oh, haha, very funny. The adventure idea is good, but come up with a real title, please. But because it feels like this battle out there, I feel I have to fight.
Yeah, that title makes sense
really
in this.
Sucks.
Makes much more sense in this situation than any time. There was a post about financial troubles in your company a while ago.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's always financial troubles in the company these days. It's basically for the past 3 years, it's been borrow money to do the stuff, and then you pay back the loan, but then you need to borrow more money to do new stuff. And it's one of the reasons why we did so many books at once. Because I was just planning originally to just publish a couple books, and then all these things end up in my lap at the same time. It's like, okay, we do the risk to publish all these books, and then just maybe once that gets into retail and the money starts coming in from all of these books at once, maybe we can be on a stable setting with all the debts paid off and still money to do the stuff moving forward. And the whether that works or not, because who knows, because retail sales aren't guaranteed any more than anything else. So I think we're still a month or two away from seeing how that pans out. But yeah, it's when I say we're back down to our natural level, that means we're not the wildly successful gaming company where I can just throw thousands of euros at various people in advances. Oh, do a project, here's some money. Here's a project. I literally, for a couple of years there, had more money than I'd ever seen in my life and more than I knew what to do with. And it just felt natural to throw it back into the company, into projects. It's like, oh, you're a top name game designer. Well, how about I give you this much money and you do a project for me? It's like, oh, okay. I spent so much money doing that, and I don't regret it, not one bit, but that I can't do that now. It's to the point where it's like, okay, I got to be able to pay these bills. If I do this, then I can do this next thing. And it's more, it's nothing's comfortable, but with the material I do, maybe nothing should be. It would be weird if I published the things I do and still had lots of extra money from doing it. I mean, that was, maybe it should have been obvious that wasn't going to last very long for whatever reason. It was nice while it lasted. I put a lot of money back into the company. I was able to travel a little bit, take an actual holiday off of role-playing income. And that was just like, can't do that now. And it's like, yeah, now I'm really working for a living. And it's still a better job than pretty much anything else I could be doing for, so I just have, just get used to it and stay used to it. And
I'm gonna ask for the sake of curiosity. So did you have any real job before? And what was it?
Well, nothing that was a career. I mean, what did I do? The job I had before moving to Finland, I worked, in the warehouse for the local school system, delivering school supplies and furniture to various schools. And like when a school was being constructed during the summer, had the real fun time of being part of the crew, bringing all the furniture in, with no air conditioning in the middle of the Florida summer. Oh, poor me. But, or I did lots of phone center jobs.
Yeah,
I did,
that's
data processing, computer jobs. So yeah, I had real jobs. It's not my whole life, clinging to role playing, but yeah.
No, but it's so I would say that would be better to get rid of, to be able to live from creating role playing games.
Yeah.
Even.
How did you end up in Finland?
Women.
Nice. It's a good reason.
Yeah, I came here to get married. Didn't work out, but luckily I was still here long enough to get my visa renewed. That was lucky timing, but because once I came to Finland, I mean, I never really fit into the US. I don't really fit into Finland here, but people here are more standoffish, so it's easier to not fit in. But the joke when I came to Finland was that, now that I'm here, all of the news out of the US just sounds like Mad Max. And that just gets more and more true every year. It's another one of these things I repeat all the time, but it's so true. It's like every time you hear something from the US, it's like, what the fuck is wrong with them? Why can't they do anything? Why is everything just what? is there anyone there that doesn't just fuck everything up?
So did you learn how to speak Finnish?
No, that's
It's a
well,
weird language.
well, it's. I've got no good reasons, but lots of good excuses. You know, when I first moved here, I was past 30, and they, you know, because of the area of the country I was living in, they tried. I didn't speak anything but English, and they tried to teach me two languages at once, Swedish and Finnish. And my ex, you know, she was a native Finnish speaker or Swedish speaker. There's a Swedish speaking minority in Finland, but they didn't speak normal Swedish. They had this country dialect. So, and they didn't speak any Finnish. It was weird that the town I was living in, Vasa, it was like I think it was the most evenly proportioned between Finnish and Swedish speakers. And it was like a segregated city. The people that spoke Swedish would want to shop in stores that greeted them in Swedish. People that spoke Finnish would want to go to stores that greeted them in Finnish. And they'd speak English when talking to each other. It was the weirdest damn thing. And it was very easy to not learn the language. It was because I had this feeling, because the Swedish speaking population is only like 5%. And even though that was like my in-laws family, it's just like, how much effort do I want to spend to talk to 5% of the population? And that's stupid thinking, because learning Swedish would be better than learning nothing. But I wanted to learn Finnish. But then the Finnish teacher at the school was a native Swedish speaker. So she was fluent in Finnish, but didn't have the cadence that a native Finnish speaker would have with it. So the way she spoke Finnish didn't sound like the way people on the street were speaking Finnish. And you know, the ex's family, you know, didn't speak any Finnish, so I wasn't learning from them. And then and then English is just so prevalent in Finland that if you have any difficulty, any hesitation when trying to speak Finnish, they just switch to English. And it's and then of course, once I started doing the role-playing company thing, I'm working at home. I'm not around people very much. You know, and even with my second wife, you know, she would watch TV all the time, the news, and so every day I'd be hearing Finnish, but it wouldn't stick. When an actual Finnish speaker, like, I can understand if a foreigner speaking Finnish, because they're slow enough and the breaks between the words that I can keep up. I'm not completely useless. But when it's a native speaker speaking in the native cadence, I can pick out a word here and there. Otherwise, you know, I'm better at reading, but trying to listen and keep up. And because of the way Finnish is constructed, where all the conjugations happen at the end of words, I'm way too slow in trying to decipher, and I feel like an idiot. And I certainly could have always done more. But then I noticed in Helsinki, more and more of like cafes and shops don't have any Finnish. Like if I go to the Burger King in the shopping center here across the street, there's an even chance that the person behind the counter doesn't speak any Finnish and is greeting everybody in English. So it's weird, because it's like, I feel bad that that's happening, because all of us foreigners should be learning Finnish, but I'm part of the problem. But there's like no difficulty in my life for that. I mean, there are some, like, I'll get letters from places and they'll be using complicated language, like from banks or something like that, and I need help translating that. But for the 99% of my life, not knowing Finnish properly doesn't hurt me at all, even though I'm living in Finland. And that's weird, but that it's but I get into this mindset, oh, that's one thing I don't have to worry about. So why would I put in all the effort? Even though at the same time I know I should. But yeah, I just, yeah. there's no, yeah, I talked for a long time to not come across very good, come across as a stereotypical, I'm American, I'm not going to learn a language.
I see that on my job, because I work for a multinational and I have a lot of people here that are from several places. So when they move to Portugal, and we speak English because it's the common language, right? The one that everyone speaks. And since they are with their colleagues, they speak English. When they go out, everybody speaks English. So most of them don't learn Portuguese. The only thing that they complain is that sometimes when they go to the supermarket, it's hard to identify whatever they want. And I was like, yeah, but in the label, you always have English in the label. You just have to look for it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's normal.
Is your TV dubbed there or subtitled?
Fortunately, it is not.
Yes.
It's just subtitles.
Subtitles. Well, then
The Spanish usually dub things, but not.
And the Italians,
not
I
here.
think.
Yeah.
Okay, that's yeah. Because that's how that makes, yeah. I'm not that familiar with Portugal.
Of course not.
Nobody is.
It's like, I know Moonspell, and that's like,
yeah, of course you know Moonspell. That's how well you know metal.
I was wondering if, of course, everybody knows Moonspell, right?
Yeah, well, that
I like the beginning. Album. I like their first albums, but not the.
Well, they had a middle period that was kind of iffy. They've gotten more back on track, but that Wolfheart, that the guitar solo for the first song, that it's just one of the best guitar solos. It's just like perfect atmosphere, perfect pacing. It's their first album is that's great stuff. But yeah, it was always my experience doing interviews for my zine that if it was a country where the television is subtitled, that means they're hearing lots of English. On the television, because I imagine you're getting a lot of American and British TV shows there.
Yes.
Yeah. So they'll be, people from those countries, easy to speak English. Whereas the countries where it's dubbed, you're either going to get a person who speaks English well or not at all.
Yeah, probably.
So that's.
Yeah, in Spain, most people have, they try speaking English, but the accent is usually a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's annoying when I go to Germany for conventions and I go back to the hotel and it's just like, the only thing to watch is BBC International if I'm lucky enough that it's in the hotel. And it's just a news channel because all of the channels, even the American programs are dubbed into German. Although the worst country for the dubbing I've ever been in was Poland.
Oh yeah,
I knew you were going to say that.
Because the boring guy dubbing things.
Yeah, they don't.
It sounded like the same guy every time.
Yeah, they don't dub their television. They have somebody narrating it.
But it's still like that. I know it was in the 90s, but I thought they have changed that thing. It's awful.
No, as of 2016, they were still doing it.
Yeah, we watched The Witcher, and it was I know, but The Witcher was different. The Witcher is Polish. It was original, but he had a narrator in the beginning and in the end.
Yeah, okay, but that's
saying what the show was. That's different.
Yeah, but the idea, like I can remember, watching an episode of, I think, NCIS in Polish, so you can hear the original audio underneath. But then it's somebody basically saying, oh, and then this character is saying this and this character is saying that. Because I asked somebody and it's like, what's going on with the weird dubbing? It's like, oh, they're not dubbing, they're narrating. It's like, who can watch that?
It's very strange. Well, I suppose they're used to it and they can stand it, but it's really strange.
Yeah. I mean, at least I can like respect German dubbing, because they it's like they assign specific people to specific actors. Yeah, a lot of, so it's like they're serious about their dubbing. So it's like, okay, I guess I can respect that. But whatever they're doing in Poland, it's like, come on, subtitle or properly dub. Make a decision, Jesus.
I always imagine that the guy stuck there reading all day long.
Locked in a cage. So you're not thinking about getting back to the US?
Only for Gen Con.
Mm.
Are you
So
going to be allowed in Gen Con? Now that is a tricky question. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
But with
well, I
safety
was
cards
there.
and all that. Okay, you see, there'll be no safety tools.
Well, it was fine in 2019. I thought I'd be walking into a war zone in 2019, but it was fine, and you know they've approved my booth for now. You know,
I
that's
was
been
watching
delayed.
some interview. I think it's a recent one, probably the Bruno Gallant show. You were talking about. I think it was that, but you had a security guard before or something.
Yeah, that was
And
2018 that we had the
yeah,
security
yeah.
guard, because they had a little bit before Gen Con 2018, some guy had done a big post, that got spread everywhere about how the new edition of Vampire was like neo-Nazi, Nazi sympathizing kind of thing. And the people who had worked on Vampire were getting death threats. And
Was
that's,
that
people were taking that seriously.
the Chechen death camps? Was about
No,
that?
no, this was before that.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is before that.
I missed that one.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like some furry wrote this thing, but Zach Smith, because he had worked with them on the video game, on a video game for the release of the new edition, and so there was a section dedicated to him, and there were all these people getting death threats. So it's like, okay, maybe I should hire a security guard this year, and I went, I asked around about getting private security, and that wasn't going to work because I'd be liable for whatever the security guard did because he's part of my crew, and I'd have to pay for his entry and then all blah, blah, blah. But the convention offers security, and it was, it was still some money, but oh God, this poor guy, the security guard that they actually provided for their hefty fee was this really old, sweet guy that would have been useless for, if there was any trouble, the only use he would have been as a witness that we didn't start it.
So that,
Otherwise,
I think that's funny because sometimes in movies there's an old man acting as a security guard, and I always thought that was well, it's ridiculous, but so it's real. It happens.
It's real. Yeah. Oh, it's very real. And yeah. And I remember when the doors opened the first day, we had some Gen Con debuts. So we had this huge rush to the booth. It was like we were there for a full hour just dealing with that initial rush before we, could breathe. And he was acting, and the security guard was doing crowd control. Oh, you can't block this aisle. You can't do that. And it's great. I'm paying for this guy and he's fucking with my customers. Holy shit. But there were no incidents, nobody, for all the, yeah, it's so weird because
so
all the shit you see online
threats, yeah. No.
Yeah.
But you never know when it's going to spill over into real life. You don't know. Because here's somebody, because when people are getting death threats, and I know people who worked on Vampire that dealt with that situation and the Chechen vampire stuff, and it's that sucks because it's back to the same problem of these people are just making shit up. And they're coming under this kind of attack for no good reason.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's not directed at me. If I see that this is happening and that people are on board with, oh, go get them, they did a bad thing, it's like, sooner or later that's going to be coming back at me. Sooner or later, it's going to be me the fingers pointed at again. So I don't support it, even when it's people that have talked shit about me and mine. Even when people have engaged in this behavior, when it's their turn to be the target, I don't celebrate. I don't say, oh, that's what you get. I still say, this isn't right. Even if this motherfucker did it, it's still perpetuating the cycle. It's showing that what he did was right, except you have to agree on the target. It's like, no. Maybe now this person can learn to not do it in the future, but you don't celebrate that the wolves are hunting someone you don't like. It's like, if you don't like someone, that's fine, but in that situation where they're in trouble, you still have to do what's right, even if it's in support of someone that you very much disagree with and have had arguments with before. It's like, you cannot support this bullshit.
Yeah, totally agree. We have to try to be the best person. Sometimes I feel like I want to laugh because when that happens, because they should figure out. Yeah, you laugh. They should figure out by now that they attack each other, so they eat each other. So sooner or later, they should realize that their time will come. Their turn will come.
They should have realized that, but apparently they don't realize it. If I was in that particular group, I would be always thinking, well, my time is going to come sooner or later, because it always does. Well, if it doesn't, it's just because someone forgot them. Well,
it's you see, this is me projecting onto these people, but I think there's two camps. There's the true believers, who that's not going to occur to them to think that way, because they think what they're doing is the absolute right thing to do. So if they're doing the right thing, why should they worry about it happening to them? And then there's going to be the people who full well realize that next time it could be them, but maybe if they're on the side of the people doing it now, it's like, yeah, someday this might be me, but it's not today, and I can survive by taking part. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but all that process, it's not a good place to be.
No,
from the part of those, always.
And, creativity can come from that mindset, in my opinion.
Well, when it's happening to you, not much creativity is happening.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe in the aftermath, but then again, well, Zach has nothing to do with this book. Is it really good? I mean, there are other media where maybe taking aim at current events makes sense within the medium. But for role playing, maybe that's not such a good idea. Ripped from today's headlines. Oh, this is what happened to me. Maybe that's not a good thing in the moment to try to make into a fun game product. I mean, maybe it's what you're compelled to do internally. But as I said earlier, maybe it'd be something I had to do, but not the best business move. It's like, why? Yeah, that's difficult. Whereas like Death, Love, Doom, that was inspired by my first divorce, but there was years separation. So it wasn't, oh, this is happening to me and I have to deal with it and I'm going to lash out no, it was something more considered, more transformed into game nonsense, and not just, oh, my feelings. So
these new books, none of those are yours, right? They are from other authors.
Yeah, we did a reprint of the first edition of Death, Frost, Doom, but yeah, that's just a reprint. Yeah.
So you haven't been writing, or you're writing?
I have so many quarter and half done things. It's like I'll get it's like, okay, the ref book is what I always should be working on, and I'll get something done, but then I think I need to take a break. I need to do something else instead of just this, because I have all these other ideas. But whether I'm working on the ref book or whether I'm working on one of these other projects, something else comes up to break the cycle, to break the creative, I'm in the zone and I'm doing this. And then I have to deal with something else because I always prioritize other people's projects over mine. The same way that, you know, Alex does most of the layout and he's also doing his own writing. But the rule is, if there's somebody else's project to do layout on, they take priority over your project. It's always, it's this weird, you know, and Kelvin is doing a lot of writing for me, but if there's a project I need him to do art on for, you know, on someone else's book, that takes priority over whatever he's writing. It's this weird, it's this policy of not your thing. The thing you're doing for someone else always takes precedence over your own thing for some reason.
So you have nothing scheduled for soon.
I do. It's just going to be a 6, assuming I get it done properly in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing, there's some things that have not yet been announced that aren't final, that aren't confirmed. So I don't want to give too many details, but if everything goes the way it should in the next few days, the plan is going to be to do a series of booklets that will be printed in the US and be on sale through the US store. And the plan is that I would have like a 16-page, just a very small dungeon as part of that. But then I always plan, I'm going to have, I mean, yeah, there's always, as I said, I have so many things half done and half. So, but that's the plan, and hopefully that'll go forward and there'll be a thing. But yeah, I haven't been that great in writing for quite a while, which is not a good thing. I'm hoping once I get the ref book done, there will be none of the, because whenever I'm doing anything of any other project that's mine, there's a certain amount of urgency and also guilt and also, but yeah. So I'll have this idea that's like, okay, this is what my schedule is going to be. So I'm going to do this much with the ref book and then have this time for this other project and this, but then something always interjects that I got to pay attention to this, or this something's come in. It's like, oh, that's now the priority. And then I come back and it's all a jumble again. I'm not, when I put the last books on sale, you know, this past October, if the sales were wildly successful, and they were pretty good, but they weren't wildly successful, one of the things I'd said I'd wanted to do was like hire a part-time assistant, because organization is one of the things I'm shit at. I just kind of fell into this being a publisher and dealing with all these people kind of thing. It's not my natural mode. I've good enough to get by with it, but I should be the wild and crazy creator, not the boss. I mean, holy shit. But if not me, who is the problem I'm in? So one of my ideas, if the sales have been wildly successful, would be to hire a part-time assistant, someone that could help me with time management and scheduling and maybe doing some of this miscellaneous shit. Oh, okay. You call the bank. Oh, there's a problem with the credit card. You know, call the bank and you deal with it instead of me, you know, sitting on the phone for 2 hours on hold and, you know, shit like that. So yeah, that was the hope. Something to help me be more organized and maybe deal with some of the admin that running a business in a highly bureaucratic country, you know, so something to make all of that easier, because when I'm in the zone, I'm good. But once the zone is broken, good fucking luck getting me back into it. And that's, yeah.
We bought recently your adventure anthologies, well, not the 3 of them, the Death and Fire, and I was browsing through this, and I found something that's, I think it's interesting and unusual. Games are nothing, adventures are everything, which is something that, well, usually role players don't say, and game designers even less.
Well, originally, Lamentations was just supposed to be adventures. It, I had no intentions of creating a full game out of it. It was just going to be adventures that could be used with Osric or Labyrinth Lord or Swords and Wizardry. But a funny thing happened. They sort of caught on. There was like the potential to be more. Because I originally started the business through a government program that helped foreigners start a business. And I was able to convince them to give me money for 6 months and then extended another 3 months. So 9 months total, I think it was, where I convinced them that this role-playing thing could be a viable business. And I thought I was full of shit when I made that presentation to them. I just thought, hey, I just want, I can just do this for 9 months and don't have to actually look for a job. Just get to sit home and write role-playing stuff. This would be great. And as it turns out, there were indications it could actually be a business. And I was just like, oh, God, outsmarted myself. And it became obvious that I wasn't going to get market penetration doing just adventures for obscure systems. It wasn't going to get into stores. It wasn't going to get it. It had to be its own brand name. It had to have its own game for all these adventures to. And I think the fact that Lamentations of the Flame Princess uses the open game license to basically be a sort of clone of old Dungeons and Dragons, that's a historical accident. That's just what I got into. And the way games were made back in the 70s and 80s, there's any number of games that I could have gotten into that Lamentations could have ended up, if I'd gotten into Traveller, if Traveller was my home native game, then Lamentations would be Traveller oriented. It would be bolted onto a Traveller chassis. If it had been RuneQuest or Call of Cthulhu, then it would have been bolted onto a BRP base. If it was Tunnels and Trolls, all these things that Lamentations could have still been every bit of Lamentations, even if the rule set was different. This changes once games. There's something about the old school games that were supposed to be simulating a kind of reality, however loosely. Once you start getting to games that are trying to simulate narrative tropes instead of what would happen in this situation if it was real, then it maybe wouldn't work as well. But for these old style games that were trying to simulate reality in some way, I think Lamentations could have worked just as well as Lamentations if it was married to one of these other underlying systems. So the actual game, the system, the game really isn't the important thing. I mean, because of the base that Lamentations uses, I mean, there have been people that use Lamentations stuff with D&D 5th edition, with any number of the other OSR games. Yeah, it's fairly interchangeable, the rule set. So the actual game is not the important thing. It's just the reality of how the marketplace works, that the rule book has just sold tons and tons and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. But to me, it's like that's the most boring thing of the whole line. It's a rules reference. It's not the game. I mean, if you look at how it's formatted, it's designed to be an at the table reference. It's not the thing designed to suck you in. I mean, all that the text doesn't do that really at all. It's just the art that's going to do it.
Yeah,
but there's
the
nothing
art
that
is really stunning.
But there's nothing in the rule book that tells you this is Lamentations. This is why it's cool. It's just the rules.
There's no fluff and nothing like that.
Yeah, because the game is not the thing. It's all of the supplements, the stuff, the applications. That's what makes Lamentations great, in my opinion. And the rules are highly functional. They work. I'm not saying it's just a pile of shit, but the rules are just an adaptation of what someone else did. It's open game license stuff with changes and permutations, but it's essentially someone else's work. So I don't have the great attachment to that. I think I've dressed it up quite nicely to get across the atmosphere of what Lamentations is. But if you really want to get into the meat of what the game is, and I think this will be the same for most any game, you got to look at the things that are actually designed to be played, not the engine with which you play it.
Yeah. But in this case, I was browsing through them, and probably you don't even have to use a OSR system. It wouldn't be that difficult to adapt this to any game. Of course, you would have to work on stats and something like that, but it's characters and story. And since there's no setting, so it did work, because usually people don't really buy that much adventures. They buy the books and sometimes the source books, but the adventures is something that usually it isn't that appealing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I guess yeah, well, of course I say that's unfortunate because we do a lot of adventures, but I mean, I think even as a kid, it was. I mean, what was the exciting thing about Dungeons and Dragons? Was it the player's handbook, or was it the Village of Hamlet? What was it? Was it the Tomb of Horrors? Was it Against the Giants? What was it? All these things that showed what you can do with the game, what the game could be, the game in action, basically. Those were so much more exciting than the rule books.
Isn't that sometimes to blame the author of the adventures, because sometimes they are uninteresting and railroading and
well, yeah, but that's sometimes you got bad adventures, sometimes you got bad rules. I mean, it's
and sometimes you have bad game masters or dungeon masters or whatever we want to call it.
But the thing to me that was legendary about the old D&D, the thing that created the memories of D&D, wasn't how we rolled the dice. It was the game we were playing that the dice rolling was in service of. So yeah,
I agree with you. I also I didn't apply the rules most of the time even when I started to play. We just we had a faint notion of what the rules were, but we basically didn't care. Well, we were kids then. I still do that.
You write settings, you don't write games, so of course you agree with that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I wrote 3 adventures and a couple of game settings, so yeah. And I can't see myself writing a game because I don't like rules. I don't like mechanics, and probably to make it sell, I would have to pick up an OSR system, with which I'm not familiar with, because the last time I played, I never played since I was 20 years old. The last time I played Dungeons and Dragons, I think. Well, at least the last time I dungeon mastered. And well, not really. I'm never into OSR, which is probably a problem. I should have. I'm trying now to. I'm trying now to get into it. Probably it's not too late yet. So Sylvia,
you'll be 80 and you'll be like, well, however old you are now. Oh, when I was that old, it seemed too late to get into new games.
No, I don't have another question, but I did remember, because I was when we're talking about movies, I remember the gross and stupid scene from another horror movie, but I didn't remember the name of the movie. And now I was able to find it. Hereditary. Do you remember that one?
Oh, it's from a few years ago. Hereditary.
Yeah, from a few years ago. Yeah, I thought the film was really. The film was really boring. But that part when the girl gets her head chopped off, I just laughed like crazy. So this is the kind of disturbed person I was. That was the best part of the movie. And this is the most terrible one.
Well, that's a rough scene because I don't think I laughed, but yeah, that was just a kind of like, whoa, okay. It's
Yeah,
like,
but at the
now,
same time I laughed. 'Cause
yeah.
I wasn't enjoying that movie.
Yeah, and I had my friend saying, "Oh, we saw a great movie, Hereditary. You should watch this, amazing." And then I finally watched, like, no, it's boring. I laugh at the most awful scene in the movie. That's the one interesting thing.
Yeah. I like the guys like Midsummer, I think. Yeah, it was a better
Yeah.
movie. Same director. I liked Hereditary well enough. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't
the end was kind of boring for me. I think the end in the end it was kind of okay. This is weird and getting boring.
I think some other movie we saw at the same time. It was Get Out. Get Out.
Yeah, maybe it more or less at the same time, but that's not even our movie.
Yeah, but a lot of people like that one. Not
But
really.
yeah,
That one was
we can close the interview with that beautiful image of Hereditary and that awful scene of the girl getting her head chopped off.
Okay, James. Thank
Very
you for coming, and well, I hope you can get your referee's book done quickly.
Oh, God. It'd be so great when that's finally out the door and I don't have to fucking worry about it anymore. The blessed day that will be. Or cursed day for everyone else when they read it. But but thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice week. Bye bye.